Hey Melissa, how are you?
Hey, I'm good. Good to see you.
Good to see you too. How you doing?
I'm doing well. It is nice to see you after a few weeks.
I know it's been some time. So thank you for taking some time to have this conversation with me today. I figured we kind of start off by talking about, what was your relationship with food like before we did the program? We kind of just wrapped things up a couple weeks ago. We worked together for 5 months. So if you're comfortable sharing, how were things prior to the program together?
Yeah, it's crazy that it was 5 months.
I know.
Yeah, so I think before we started, I had spent kind of a year and a half in a really diety mindset. It started out, I wasn't trying to diet, I was just trying to live like a healthier lifestyle. And so
Mhm.
it started with, cutting out all the foods that, the wellness community was saying is not as good for you or that you should limit, and
Yeah.
trying to eat as many vegetables as possible, or all these different rules that, whether it was trying to be more keto or intermittent fasting, like
Mhm.
all these things that I thought, I wasn't necessarily going into the intention of losing weight or dieting, but that was always kind of, I think, in the back of my head. And so food was a tool that I was using to kind of, I was applying all these rules to it, and slowly over time that just turned into restricting more and more. I was exercising constantly, and I never felt like I was actually thinking about what I wanted to eat. I always had a plan at the beginning of the week of what I was going to eat, and I kind of felt guilty if I deviated from that. And um, so never was I going for the foods I was really feeling in the moment. I was really sticking to a plan, and I had so many foods that were off limits. And in the months leading up to finding you and starting this program, I'd been doing all the right things that people would say were, the wellness community would say is the right way to eat, and I had never felt more like my GI system was off completely. I was seeing a doctor for that, having to go on different medication to try to make my GI system function again. And I was like, but I'm eating all the things that they say
Yeah.
are going to be good for my stomach. How is this happening to me for the first time ever? And I was always preoccupied with food. I wasn't enjoying social situations because I was just thinking about the food constantly. And so that's kind of how I realized, like, this can't be right. If I'm doing all the things that people say to do,
Yeah.
and I feel like worse than I've ever felt in terms of my actual body, there has to be some disconnect. This can't be how I'm like supposed to live the rest of my life.
Yeah, yeah. So then how did you find intuitive eating? Like what kind of piqued your interest in that? Where'd you hear about that for the first time?
Yeah, so I had a friend that pointed me towards some sort of anti-diet resources, and within that I came across what was probably just a brief description of intuitive eating. And the things that caught my eye were, like the unconditional permission to eat, and reconnecting with your body's cues about hunger and fullness and
Mhm.
satisfaction.
Yeah.
And everything I read about intuitive eating online was like, that's how I want to feel, and this is
Yeah.
how I'm frustrated, and this is what would be amazing if I could just not think about food other than in meal times, and get rid of all the food rules, and eat with a freedom that allows you actually to like stop thinking about food. And so I went online, and I ended up finding you as like someone in my area that worked with intuitive eating,
Yeah.
and that's kind of how I came about it.
Awesome. And so since doing this program and actually implementing all those things into your life, what kind of things have shifted for you?
Yeah, I mean, so much. I have so much more headspace now to be able to
Mhm.
focus on literally anything else other than food.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm more focused in my outside life, whether that's with my friends, my work, my relationship. I just am able to be way more present, which is something that I really, really wanted.
Yeah.
In terms of food, like, I don't have food rules anymore. I don't think of food as like junk food or bad food.
Yes.
It's so crazy freeing that, like, I eat what I want. And at the beginning of this, I probably would have said like, oh, well, I'm gonna want ice cream and cookies and spaghetti all the time. But
Yeah.
your body, like, that's not what my body wants all the time. Sometimes it
Yes.
wants salad, sometimes it wants spaghetti. And giving myself the permission to eat those things without feeling any guilt or feeling like it's bad for me has made it so clear, through 5 months and a little bit more time of this,
Hmm.
like, my body does want such a diversity of foods, and there's so much benefit in eating all of those things, whether it's for the satisfaction and the happiness that it brings me, or whether it's for the nutrients or whatever. But
Hmm.
the idea that I am not spending my time constantly planning or, adding random things to my diet that I don't even want and I'm just forcing down because I think I need to have them,
Yeah.
it's just been uh, such a wonderful transition and has allowed me to just feel like like I trust my body again, which is awesome.
Yeah. And I feel like for you in particular, you were kind of coming from a place where you were eating tons of vegetables. You were eating tons of the things, like you said earlier, the things that you should be eating. And so it probably seems strange in like, let's introduce more variety of
Yes.
these things that wellness culture tells you to cut out. And
Oh
in
yeah.
doing so, you were able to not only heal your relationship with food, but I know that you'd mentioned your GI system feels significantly different as well.
Yes. Yeah. It's actually amazing that like I did not go a day before we talked, like for months, probably from, June through July and into August or whenever our first meeting was. Like, I was suffering so much stomach pain and bloating and gas and just like the worst GI stuff that was felt awful. And then I
Yeah.
started eating pizza on a regular basis again and spaghetti, and my body was fixed. And like, that's such a weird thing. I went
Yeah.
from like just force feeding myself every type of vegetable and cutting out bread and rarely eating cheese, like all these things that you're
You're
supposed to
supposed to
do,
do.
and it
Yeah.
was awful for me. And so the and literally it was that change. I didn't do anything else. It was
Yeah.
just that change and like not being so rigid and restrictive and cutting out all these other things that are a perfectly normal part of a normal healthy diet
Yeah.
um
Yeah.
was such a game changer for me.
Yeah. And it's important to highlight, like you just said, it's not like you started some medication or you added in some thing. Like the only thing that really you were changing is your relationship with food and therefore the foods that you were consuming. And again, maybe some of those foods that wellness culture tells us that we need to cut out.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
All the powders and the supplement, like the just all of it. I'm
Yeah.
so happy to be done with it. Like I think when you realize you're like cutting out fruit because you think fruit's bad, like that's when you're
Yeah.
like, what am I doing?
You're like, wait a minute.
Like what? Like why do I think a banana's bad? Like that's
I
just the word.
know.
Like it's so messed up. It's so messed up.
Uh-huh. I know. I know. Well, so for anyone that might be kind of like on the fence with intuitive eating, I think a lot of people see it through social media and that's kind of their first exposure to it. And um, people feel a little hesitant. Is there anything that you would tell people to either encourage them or to give them a little bit of peace of mind? Like anyone, whether it was a friend or stranger on the internet, something you'd like them to know about intuitive eating?
Yeah. Well, I think like one of the myths I see, at least when I'm like, looking at some of the social media stuff that's out there on intuitive eating, is people will be like, this myth that you're not going to be able to control yourself if you listen to your body. And
Yeah.
I totally get that concern. I lost the ability to know when I was hungry or full, and I had just been relying on external factors for
Hmm.
so long, longer than I even realized, to tell
Yeah.
me when to eat, how much to eat, what to eat. And it takes, I mean, intuitive eating is a process. There's a reason to go through the full, to read the book on it
Yeah.
and to go principle by principle and to meet with someone. um, it takes time. So the first thing is like, this is a program for a reason.
Yeah.
And it's a process, and obviously you have so many different ways for people to do that at various levels of financial commitment.
Hmm.
But the like you do have to commit and be ready to like put your faith in your ability to regain trust in your body
Yeah.
and know that like I went in with such fear that I was gonna, if I put ice cream in my fridge, I was gonna eat the whole pint of ice cream, or if I put chips on my counter, I was gonna eat the whole thing of chips. And
Mm-hmm.
your body has such a way of telling you when to stop and when to go and what it needs. And
Mm-hmm.
intuitive eating really helped me to give that power back to my body
Mm-hmm.
instead of putting it in the hands of like some random wellness influencer on social media.
Yeah.
And so I think like just having faith in that process and also really committing
Yeah.
yourself to it being a process. It's not going to be perfect from day one. There were certainly times when I was, still disappointed, or I still found myself letting, negative thoughts come in, and that's okay. The whole point is every time that you listen to your body is a data point, and every, every new meal is a new opportunity to, get more in touch with your body. And so I just encourage anyone who's like really ready to stop, like at least if in my experience, just stop thinking about food constantly and like allow yourself to have such a more productive and enjoyable present.
Uh-huh.
Definitely encourage them to look into intuitive eating.
I think that's one of the most important things you or anyone can say to someone, is because I think people learn about it or they try it or however, they explore it for a month and it feels like nothing's changed, or how come I'm not an intuitive eater yet? And I think a lot of that comes from diet culture promising us these quick results of 30 days or 90 days or whatever it is. And it's like, you've lived in diet culture your whole life.
Yeah.
You've done this for a month. It's going to take some time. Obviously
Yeah.
we work 5 months together and hopefully you feel confident in the tools that you've acquired, but you continue to apply that, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so I think that's one of the best things you could probably tell people is just trust the process and commit to it, and just be okay with it being an ongoing practice, because that's what it
Right.
is.
And that's the thing, is like they're tools. What I picked up in the last 5 months is
Yeah.
tools for handling situations related to food for the rest of my life. I have new ways to talk to other people about my needs and food. I have ways of listening to my body instead of external cues, to talking to myself when I get
Yes.
negative in my head. Like, it's the good thing about intuitive eating is like, it's not like I have to succeed in this 5 month period and then it's it. And I have to keep like working. And if I fail, then I've ruined it. Cause every diet
Yes.
is like, you have a cheat day and suddenly you ruin the whole thing. Like, the whole
Yeah.
point of intuitive eating is just continuing to practice and continuing to use those tools and find, a deeper connection with yourself around food. And so, it just makes it so much less like pressure to be quote unquote perfect than anything
Yes.
else.
Yes, it's a process. It's not linear. It's not black and white. It's living in the gray. So thank you so much for taking time to kind of share your story and chat with me. It's been so awesome working with you. I'm very sad that our program is over.
I know, me too.
But thank you again. Thank you for sharing. And I know a lot of people will benefit from hearing this because, again, that wellness culture, the wellness diet, I think a lot of times people fall into that realm of I'm doing everything right and it still feels like something's missing. So thank you for sharing and thank you for being open.
Of course, thank you so much. It is very cliche, but it has changed, my life and has made me so much happier. So I'm very happy that I found you.
Yay, me too. Well, thank you. Thank you. I
Of
hope you have a good
course.
week and I'll chat
Oh,
with you
you
soon.
too.
Okay.
Okay, sounds good.
All right.
Bye.